That if we get clear on that, and even if someone like doesn't want to be a social worker, even if it's like, hey, I want to be an engineer, but the question comes, what I use kind of see impact is how do you want to improve the field that you're going into here? How
Mhm.
do you want to make it a little bit better? And if you get clear on that, then it doesn't even matter who accepts you or rejects you because you are
Yeah.
clear on your why and where you're going.
Welcome to the Relational Parenting Podcast. I'm Jennifer Hayes, a parent coach and 20-year childcare veteran. Each week, I sit down with my own father, Rick Hayes, and discuss the complicated issues that parents face today, as well as some of the oldest questions in the book. From the latest research and the framework of my relational parenting method, we offer thought-provoking solutions to your deepest parenting struggles. Added bonuses include intergenerational wounding discussions and guest childcare experts. We will also start taking your parenting questions in episode 5, so be sure to comment with your biggest questions or email me directly at jennie@jennieb.co. Let's get started. All right, so welcome back, everybody, to the Relational Parenting Podcast. We are here for week 4 of the education series, 4 of 5. And this week we have my friend Lauren, and she is here to talk to us about many things. But among those things, she assists families with the transition from high school to college through the college application process, which very naturally brings up different feelings of anxiety and worry and frustration and excitement and all of those things that happen in those very critical months between ending high school and heading off to college, getting into the college you want, all of those fun things. So we are going to let Lauren introduce herself and tell us her story, because she's also a parent of 3. And yeah, Lauren, welcome.
Thank you so much. I am so excited, to be here. I love actually what you were saying here about like kind of like burning it down. It reminds me so much of like, stress, anxiety, and like just getting rid of identities that no longer fit you. So I am super, super, super excited. So my name is
Yay.
Lauren. I spent 10 years in Tanzania. Just a little bit about me. I'm a mom of 3. 2 of my kids were adopted in Tanzania. The third one was born there. So I'm super excited because they all have that Tanzania on their birth certificate. For me, it's like the one
Yeah.
Cool.
unifying moment here for all of them. Yeah, and I spent 10 years there. I'm a social worker in my background, so I did my master's at Columbia, and right after that, I hopped on a plane and went right to East Africa. Actually, my sister went to Kenya at the same time, so I always joke my parents lost both of their kids to East Africa.
Oh my goodness.
Kind of in one go here, and was doing worked with kind of communities, development projects, and university there, and kind of working with kids and kind of helping them find out what they're passionate about.
Awesome.
Cool.
So
How did you come to go to East Africa? You say you both went.
That's a great story. So I'll give you the real story here. So I was in 8th grade and I was obsessed with Jane Goodall. Loved Jane Goodall. Wanted to be Jane Goodall.
Sure.
I was like, yes, this person has it made. I said, I just love this.
Right.
And then I took biology and I was like, nope, not going to be Jane Goodall. Not going to biology. This is not me, not my thing. So,
not the monkeys.
No, it was not in my. But it got me curious. So that was actually how my first trip started. I applied for a grant, and I remember like my dad he was so nervous. He flew with me halfway to Heathrow, and he just like said bye. And I knew some woman named Maimuna was going to pick me up on the other side, and I got there. And it was I had such a good time. It was the best
cute.
Experience.
Dad chaperoning you halfway. I can see that.
He is. He loves traveling, so it was such a good moment. But that's how I ended up, and I kept on going back. So it was started there, and then it was I got the Tanzania, I think, fever, and then just was like, as quick as I can go back to kind of keep learning and keep doing new projects. Service for me became something that was so much fun. It was totally life changing for me.
Cool. Just curious about that connection to East Africa from New
Yeah.
York, right? Yeah, it's like, wow, how come everybody went that same direction? That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Nope. That's how I got started.
So when you got there after grad school, what was you said you were a social worker, but to me who has also been a social worker and has grown up hearing that word, knowing that way, it's such a vague, like, cause there's it's such a huge, it's like being a nurse. What kind of nurse are you? Right. There's so many possibilities. So like, tell us more about what you did there when you moved there to work there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really a variety of things. So I worked at a university first. I was a social work lecturer, and then I designed service learning projects for students. And I think that's kind of
Mm.
how my initial passion came to really kind of connecting students with projects. I mean, they were all studying social work, and we went to visit sober houses. That was half of our project. We found NGOs that
Mm.
were doing disability advocacy. And there was something I felt truly magical that happened when we could get students out of the classroom and into the world and really, have
Yeah.
experiences with community partners. Something
Yes.
totally, it was absolutely the best. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I was doing there. I
Hands
just
on.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it really was totally transformative. And it's something that I fell in love with. I always say, like, we hear like service is for helping. And for me, it's always been, I always say, like, service feels so selfish and in the best way possible. When I do it, it just like
Yeah.
lights me up. And I see that with the students I'm working with as well. So that's what I was doing. And then I was working with the organization. So I've done everything from disability rights to LGBT activism and sober houses. And I just always kind of took students with me and sometimes even my kids. I dragged them to a couple sober houses. They were like, "Mom, we don't want to go today." I was like, "No,
They
come
loved
on."
every minute. Yes.
Yeah, no, for sure.
They'll
That's how the
appreciate
journey's.
it later. They'll appreciate it later.
Oh
They
yeah. And
Yeah.
it was one of the best experiences. I remember this past summer I went and I saw my son and we went to an organization and it's run by a woman named Aneth, and she was actually the first deaf graduate of University of Dar es Salaam, and she started this organization to help other women who struggle to find employment. And I just remember my son's face like when he entered, and I was just like, yes. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I want you there. This for me it was the reason. You could just see it was like, wow, like this is a whole different way of seeing the world. And I was so that's why I love
Yes.
it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. My service experience was, yeah, I always, when I really didn't, I never left the country till I was 26, um, 27. And I got involved with a church out here in Colorado. And, I started leading the youth group, and then the youth group went, to Haiti for a service mission. And then, a couple years later, we went to Belize, and those were for me. I was like, I can't believe I haven't been doing this my whole life. It was absolutely like exactly what you just said. I was in my element. The weather, it was miserable and humid, and like there were cockroaches, flying cockroaches like this big,
Yeah.
and
Equator.
oh my God. And it was, 105 degrees and just wet. The air was just wet every day. And, we slept in concrete forts and we were carrying concrete every day. But anyway, all of that to say that like I came back from that first mission trip and was just alive, and seeing there's something about reading about it in books, reading about different cultures, even studying them deeply versus going and living, and feeling and seeing with your own eyes and touching the dirt and smoothing the concrete and carrying the buckets. Like there's just, whatever the experience might be, I ended up after those missions, my job course changed, and I went into social work, and I went into serving people with disabilities or youth in juvenile facilities, stuck in cycles that they couldn't break out of, and different things like that. And it's definitely like there's a huge benefit to exposing children to that early. And, maybe not when they're 3, but when they're 10, 11, and starting to really form their concept of the world, taking kids and seeing how different people live, and how real different cultures are, different struggles can be, different ways of seeing the world. Like, I learned a lot from those places, and not just how difficult it is. I also learned about how to rest, how to work hard and rest, and how to balance those things versus just living the way that we live in America. And, I love that you're
That
taking
is
your
so
kids
true.
out there and getting them in there now.
Oh, yeah. No, I love it. Mine have I feel like they're I get the sigh off and like, oh, mom. But no, it is amazing to see. I mean, one of the things I think that I've seen
Sigh off.
both with my kids and a lot of like the teens that I've worked with is that it often can be that guiding thing that allows you to figure out, what do I really care about? What
Yeah.
lights me up? Like, what do I want to
Yes.
spend my time doing? And
Mhm.
that to me is there is no greater benefit than that. Getting the chance to figure that out and see, then everyone will be, kind of attracted to different things, figuring out, like I am definitely like my oldest son is sports and soccer, and I would definitely not be organizing the soccer program, but I was a bassoon player. He would definitely be there and kind of or building things, and just it's amazing to see people's natural what someone naturally loves come to
Yeah.
life in service.
Whether you
Yes.
actually end up in that field or not, you develop transferable skills too, like you started to
Mm-hmm.
mention there, getting in and organizing a bunch of people to build something or start something up. That's all really transferable people skills. And, you can take that wherever you go. There's no wasted time there, giving that a try.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's always kind of felt like an adventure, I can say. I think it's something that I felt like, hey, it reminds me like, if I don't have to go on an actual safari, I can just kind of go somewhere with my kids. It's so many times I think like, at least for myself as a parent, we're in those positions where we're trying to figure out like, oh, what am I supposed to, okay, there's like the rules and the guidelines and all of that, but like sometimes it's nice just to kind of go out there and have fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is. And it's also a community feel. So in service, whether you, like you guys were both saying, whether you end up in the service field or social work or anything like that when your kids get older, doesn't matter. The experience, the exposure to different ways of life, and seeing like very real perspectives of the world, and being able to form the way that you see the world and approach the world literally creates empathy just very naturally inside of somebody, and the ability to understand difference and
Yes.
accept difference. And also
Yeah.
inside of service is built-in community. You are in a group of people, and you have to, whether you're figuring out what you're good at. And maybe your son he's the one that takes the kids out and runs around with a soccer ball while the adults are trying to get stuff done, or he's the one that's really great at building something or conceptualizing a new building, or like it might be a million different things, and there's a million jobs to do inside of any community. And so it's a real opportunity for kids to like find themselves a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so true because I think it's like sometimes I've seen this again so many times with teens is that we kind of ask ourselves the question is like, what makes me unique? What makes me different? And the truth is
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
have never met one person who doesn't have something that is intrinsically, inherently special about them that can be of
Yes.
value to someone else.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
also good to learn that you have a role and there are other people, that you're not the best at everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And right, work in a team and go, okay, maybe I'm not supposed to be the leader. Maybe I'm not supposed to be the
Mhm.
finance person, the detail person. I like to carry bricks, or I like the
Mm-hmm.
physical physical part of things. And, like I say, there's no part of that kind of learning that's wasted. That's,
That is so powerful. I think that's so
yeah,
true. I think that is so true. It's like the idea that I don't need to do everything. I don't
yeah,
like, and I think that if there's
Yeah.
like one message that like anyone can take, it's that we do not need to be everything, everyone, all the time. Like,
Yes.
let us find what we're good at. It's like me with tech. Like, let's call in the truth. Let's call in the discord,
yeah.
right?
Right?
Learn to
You
collaborate. It's kind of like the strengths finder. Do what you're good at, and call somebody when there's somebody. If there's not your specialty, call somebody. Work, collaborate,
yeah,
reach out, learn to reach out.
Yeah.
that's so true. That is so true. I don't think, yeah,
So
absolutely.
Lauren, tell us more then about, so you were in Tanzania, you had your children, you adopted your children, and then how did all of that lead you into what you do today?
That is great. That is such a good question. I love this story because it reminds me. So I was actually in Tanzania during COVID when COVID
Mm-hmm.
was happening, and it was
Oh
one of the
boy,
most yeah, oh yeah, it was so interesting because it was like the mass exodus of expats. We'll say that it was like everyone
really?
was leaving, and of course I was not leaving because I was in the process of adopting my daughter, and her adoption actually had been delayed. So my
Mm.
husband actually had gone back to the US. So we had been 14 months in Tanzania trying to homeschool in a house that was never actually technically supposed to be a house with like a tin roof and like trying to Google YouTube videos for math for like my kids. And it was just, yeah, it was totally, such an experience. But yeah, that's
Wow.
kind of how I kind of got into this. But one of the things I saw that really kind of bothered me, I think even from like the social work perspective, is that like when a lot of expats left, so went with them the projects. And I was like, how is
Mm.
this how is this
Oh,
okay? Like this isn't okay. We just lost a health center. Like this feels
Uh,
wrong. So
yeah.
made me ask, what can we do to create things where again you can have service
huh.
programs that are not based on someone fully having to be there all the time in person, kind of like online work where people can get connected to communities. And I think as well for me it was wanting to see how we could have that option for communities, but then also it was equally as a time, like I said, I was in the process of trying to finalize my daughter's adoption. There was like that uncertainty of trying to figure out, oh, we don't even know. I mean, I just look back at the time and I think, wow, like we didn't know when the date was. Of course, we were all living together. And it was I just remember like this emotionally charged time of, how do you explain this to, again, we had 3 kids. There was both of her brothers. And then, of course, my daughter, who we were all totally in love with, but then asking, like, there's like that uncertainty of, when will it finalize? What will it look like? And I just remember it being like, such a time again. I ironically, service was the thing. I think I needed something at that time to figure out how do you get out of yourself, right? You're just sitting
Yeah.
there with such
Yeah.
fear really in the whole
Yeah.
situation.
Get the
Yeah.
focus. It's so up in the air, and the uncertainty
Yeah,
and the change. Everybody, you got to learn to be resilient, and it challenges you. It's not always comfortable, but oh my gosh, is that a valuable experience? How old was your daughter while you were doing
yeah.
this?
She was around 3, so she was very young.
Very
So yeah,
little,
I
very
now have
little.
a 14-year-old, he just turned 10, a 10-year-old, and a now 5-year-old. But yeah, no, it was. I remember it. It was that moment for me that I was like, it was wanting to figure out like how do you maintain this unit? How do you keep it? And again,
Exactly. That was
yeah,
great to
it
keep them
together
together.
when
Yeah.
you yourself are feeling so uncertain, right? You have big feelings, like it's, how do you hide this? And I think that was the journey for me in that time, trying to figure out how do you balance both keeping it real, but then also simultaneously as you're going through a very hard process, not, and I think this was pretty important for me, not losing your joy for everyone. Like, let's still have the dance parties like in our house,
Yeah.
blasting
Yeah.
cheesy music and eating Nutella with spoons and like, running around and just like, I am sure my 14-year-old would be like, Mom, do not play
Yeah.
those videos. But
You
I have
definitely get rolling eyes now, but yeah.
yeah,
Right.
for sure.
So,
So that
parenting through COVID in another country, and uh, when you and I talked, you said that your husband was back in New York at that time too,
Yeah,
right?
separated from a
And
partner, yeah.
so it was you and 3 kids. And
Yes.
yeah,
Mm.
so tell me more about how you parented through that. What was your focus during that time?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it for me was how do you allow feelings to kind of come out into the light? How do you keep it real? I think one of the things that kind of I didn't want to come from a place of feeling like I had to fake it, feeling like I
Yeah.
had to, pretend everything was totally fine. And
Yeah.
then probably then inadvertently kind of get snippy with them,
Yeah.
not being able to connect and relate to them. So my
Mhm.
question again, for myself during the time was how would I really kind of, embrace really radical honesty during that time in ways that
Yeah.
felt, and it wasn't, it really wasn't easy. It was like hard feelings, but it was kind of like how do we both embrace hard feelings and then also see how can we fuel it? And I pair both of them because I think that's where a tree that grows in that time was so helpful for me because it was like it's so hard when you're in a hard situation and you can't see, well, what is this for, right? I think for me it felt so
Yeah.
empowering that, like, hey, we can be in this, like this can really, and I think it comes kind of reminds me of like college rejection, right? I hate when people kind of go like, oh, let's not pretend like, oh, it's totally fine, and yes, it is fine, but it also kind of like sucks, right? Like it doesn't
Yeah.
feel good to get the letter that says you've been rejected, and then you
Yeah.
compare it to be like, yes, but it's okay. Like, let's
Yeah.
acknowledge it feels bad. Like it
Yeah.
Yeah,
doesn't feel
yeah.
good. Um, so I think that was our approach during that time here.
Yeah.
I
You've
think
got to
that's
have
I think
that.
that's a good distinction
You've
for
got to have
there's
the
happiness. Yeah.
keep
Go ahead,
starting at the
sorry.
same
I think
time.
we're I think we're gonna saying the same thing too. Go ahead, sweetie.
uh there's and this is what I teach in relational parenting too, is that you've got to, like, this toxic positivity, and calling, I even touched on it with you, Lauren, talking about how the terms peaceful parenting and gentle parenting, while I know what they're trying to teach, and they're not actually saying that parenting's always gentle, parenting's always peaceful, but by naming it those things, we are in fact implying that. And that's why I wanted to call what I do relational parenting, because relationships are not always great. They're not always fun. They're not always easy. And you spend a lot of your time in relationship in conflict. And that's
Yeah,
conflict has gotten a bad rap. Conflict, hard feelings, negative feelings, has gotten a bad rap. And the truth is, though, that by going through difficult situations and really working that muscle of coping skills, healthy coping skills, acknowledging feelings, allowing the feelings to move through you, and all the different ways that that can happen, and then moving forward, having a deeper understanding of one another. And I imagine that you and your children spending that time together, I imagine a lot of households, I think that COVID was hard to navigate for literally everybody, and for families with children, especially, navigating that, you guys have a different level of understanding of one another. Um, and being able to work through that difficult time together, creates bonds and hopefully not traumas. I know in some households there are a lot of issues worldwide with unhealthy households, where the rates of certain types of abuse, et cetera, went up really, really poorly. But not to get sidetracked here, we forget that conflict serves a purpose. And instead of
yeah,
going through it together and leaning on each other and working through it, we tend to avoid it, suppress it, and then it explodes. Like you said, like pretending everything's okay and then getting snippy and mean, with your kids. Like, let's be real. Let's show our kids what being human is. Let's be honest. Like, this fucking sucks. And I'm
Yeah.
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
Yeah.
Let's talk about it. Let's get all those feelings out, and then let's problem solve together.
yeah.
That is so true. Like everything you said, that's exactly like for me, like totally spot on. It's just about, yeah, how do you walk through it? How do you kind of like link hands? And it really, I think it really was a transformative time here. And it's about kind of like holding on to each other. And again, it goes back to like finding those strengths, because in those times it was like my oldest son became, and I am notoriously like not a good cook, and that boy was making kind of meals out of everything, and I was like, wow, this is, it was just incredible. Like everyone felt like they had their kind of place. And I think it's so interesting, because I think it's like sometimes we think we have to choose, we either have to say, oh, like let's be hopeful, or we can, be real. But like I think
Mhm.
there's the space where both can kind of coexist
Yeah.
together.
Yes.
We can say
Yeah.
this hurts, but we also can kind of let it transform us.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Conflict is growth. It's not comfortable, but it's valuable experience. And to get through it and have something positive instead of, like you guys are talking about, being snippy and getting snippy and resentful and wah and living in the past, coming out of it with, okay, I know how to deal with that situation, or avoid, a situation, or head it off, or deal with it more positively. Yeah, conflict is it's good for you.
Yeah. And
It
it's
is.
hard as well, right? It's so hard because you have to kind of, deal with your own shit, really, right? It's
Yep.
like, I think,
That's
you
right.
have to sit with it. Like, you can't just like, I had to figure out, I had to, grieve in many regards here, like what I thought was going to happen or was supposed to happen or what the outcome would be, and be like, okay, let me try to figure out that so I can
Mm.
come to them. And it's so funny. Anytime I know, like, I get with if I can see myself getting into that snippy space, or like, being that mom who's like, some water falls on the ground and like, oh gosh, it's like, the explosion because the water fell on the ground. I know, like, for me, it's like that wake up call. Okay, Lauren, what's going on with you that you're not feeling good about? Because that's the
Yeah.
thing
Mm.
that, like, that's, I'm trying to like divert with water or like crayons that have gotten on the floor or something. And
Yeah.
it's really not about the crayons. It's kind of like my own,
What's
I have
my
to really,
part in this? Yeah.
yeah,
Why am I reacting this way to this thing? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
sure.
Is that self-awareness? That's
Yeah.
that takes a while for people to not just lash out at others, and never, seems like a lot of people lash out at others and never stop to think about their own,
Mhm.
oh yeah, I've been having a bad day for a while here. What do I need to do so that when the water hits the floor, it's like, somebody get a rag, please.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think
Matter
we
of
should
fact.
normalize for like mothers to say, like, it's, or parents or partners, whoever, is just to say like, hey, I'm having a really bad day. Like, this is,
Yeah.
I think that's part of like the shame buildup, is like we're supposed to say like, oh, let me like, have my great hair and put on a good filter. And then like when you take down the filter, you're just like, man, but I still feel like crap. Like, versus
Yeah.
you say like, hey, let's just have real conversations that it doesn't always feel good.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think that's important to normalize for parents, because there's I hear from a lot of parents that it's, you know, well, but where's the line between being honest and dumping on my kids as emotional crutches? And that's definitely a line that is very real, and it depends on your children's age. But I think that telling your kids how you feel versus making them wrong, making their needs wrong, making like putting any kind of blame on your kids, and or like letting your kids comfort you is good. They shouldn't be therapizing you. But being like, this is really hard for me to be at home, and we're used to going out into the world and doing things, and I know it's really hard for you too, and it's really hard for me, and I'm having a really bad day. Like, let your kids hug you and love on you and give you extra kisses and be gentle with you, and like you're not going off and being like, the world is burning down and this is happening and this is happening and this is happening. And, you're not, there's a level of just be honest. This sucks. We can say that. It's okay to say that. It's okay to have negative feelings. And like, let's now that it's out, we've all hugged, maybe we've cried a little bit. All right, what can we do together to turn this day around?
Yeah.
And so there's
Yeah.
definitely, but you're doing your children a disservice when they can see you or feel you, because they can. I don't care how hard or how well you hide it. Your
Yeah.
children can feel that you are having a shit day.
Yeah.
And they're going to walk on eggshells around you, or they're just going to, whatever. And that honesty puts all the fear aside, brings everything into the light so it can be dealt with. But if you are lying to your kids and just pretending everything is okay all the time, your children are going to learn that that's what you do. And they're never going to get language around their emotions, and they're never going to feel safe coming and telling you that they're struggling with something. Once they get to a certain age, they're just going to quit talking to you about stuff because
That's a super
yeah. So
That's
there's
super
those
important skill because you send that mixed message. You're
yeah.
acting weird, and the people around you, especially kids, don't understand it. Why? What's going on, and it just stifles everything.
Yeah.
Like you're saying, all other people know to do is to give you a wide berth. And that's not you're not being a very good parent, leader. You know,
Yeah.
at that
Oh,
point.
absolutely. I really agree. I mean, I think like vulnerability is one of like it's like for me, it's like bringing it out into the light. And I think I was reading this somewhere today, but like it's like in some ways it removes the power from it, right? It's like if we don't
Yes.
speak it, it grows
Mm-hmm.
so big. It becomes this like
Yeah.
this uninvited house guest, and you're like, how have you like taken up space in my living room? I don't want you here. Like you are
Yeah.
bad energy. We need a lot of sage to get rid of you, but like it's kind of like going about like how do we then just name it? And I remember like even today, right? I was walking out and I was kind of having, all my things were just kind of like all, not working out. And I went to my son, I said, man, I'm having a hard day. And he goes, I remember it was supposed to be, he goes to me, he's like, but mommy, he's like, are you still my mommy? I was like, yeah, of course. He goes, then
Oh.
you're not really having a bad day. I was like,
Oh,
I
oh,
thank you. Thank you.
are
I've been,
you still my mommy? See,
Oh.
that's the interesting thing about adoption, and
Mhm.
it's like that establishing that relationship and getting that really deep like that. Oh, that
Yeah.
just hits me in the heart. That
Yeah.
question. Wow.
Adoption is one of the most I've amazing experiences. I would absolutely I've had two different kinds of adoption experiences. So my first son I adopted when he was 4, and my daughter was when she was 1. So both came at different kind of ages in the whole cycle here. And I think it's for me it's a lesson in like relentless acceptance of who someone is. I think it's a
Yeah.
and again, but then it was so funny. Like then Jasiri came into the world, and I was like, well, yeah, I guess I have to accept you too. I have to accept you too. I guess it's just a parenting
Yeah.
thing, you know?
Yeah.
Um, it really, really is.
Unconditional. Wow.
Mm,
What a
yeah,
great example.
it is. It is really powerful.
So tell us more about how this, like, these are, you have had this really mindful parenting, as you've gone along your journey. Tell me more about the company that you've started now and how you help other families navigate those things.
Yeah, sure. So my company is called A Tree That Grows. So a lot of times I get the question like, okay, Lauren, what are you trying to grow? What's the tree? I said, okay, well, I definitely love trees. Like I'm one of the people who will go on safari and just like admire the trees. But
Yeah.
no, so when I was again in Tanzania, there was this beautiful tree called the baobab tree, just gorgeous, like really wild roots and branches. And
Yeah.
it honestly reminded me of like a really untamed woman. She was just like there with all her glory. I loved it. And again, when I kind of saw this, the idea behind A Tree That Grows is that we work with teens and helping them figure out their strength, their story, and their passion, and translating that into a service project that, again, both most importantly gives them clarity on who they are, but then allows them to kind of, again, take that as they are going through their college experience. And the tree that grows concept kind of came from the roots to me are where we find our story. And that's what we do. I always start with the story. For me, the story, if you ever want to figure out like what you want to do or who you are, like start by your experiences and figuring out the things that moved you. And that will like pretty much guide you into what you want to know. The trunk is, how we grow your strengths and skills. So it's growing who you are. And for me, the branches represent that moment where, we are able to kind of give that gift to others in communities. And so that's how we see service. I always say I'm a social worker who doesn't like helping. So I hate the concept of helping. I don't find it particularly useful, but I like partnership. I like learning, and I like exchange. So that's what we do. We bring together communities in Tanzania. We bring together teens really around the world. We work with students from Ecuador and Indonesia and Kenya and the UK, and we figure out, what is your driving factor? And for me, that was so important because I don't want anyone to go through the process, whether they're applying to college or they're doing a gap year. And if you don't really have a clarity on who you are, it's so tempting to look to your neighbor. And I know because like I'm 37 and I'm still tempted to do this and ask myself like, oh, does my story matter? Am I good enough? And the truth is of course, like you definitely are.
Right.
Yeah. So that's the work that I'm kind of involved in. Yeah.
I love it. Helping teenagers figure out their true north, like where they want to go, not just where they're expected to go. Yeah.
Gets
And
back
they
to
know.
that. It gets back to that self determination instead of just going with the flow or looking to others. I've heard you talk about this before, Jenny. Instead of getting your direction from others, looking within. What do I want to do? What am I good at? And being a little more self-directed.
Absolutely. And the truth is, I always say to students is that if we get clear on that, and even if someone like doesn't want to be a social worker, even if it's like, hey, I want to be an engineer, but the question comes, I use kind of see impact as how do you want to improve the field that you're going into here? How do you want to make it a little bit better? And if you get clear on that, then it doesn't even matter who accepts you or rejects you because you are clear on your why and where you're going. And if you don't have that, it was so interesting. Like I was reading an article today, and I think it was from the Wall Street Journal, and it was like how about teens, actually teen girls in America, and they were like, we are having a crisis here. I mean, this is just, rates of, suicide, sadness, depression. I mean, it was like, and I think but they said a really interesting thing. And they said, yet we're seeing, again, so many behaviors that would not be considered like at-risk behavior. So it's all of these girls who are, doing what I'm supposed to. I think I'm supposed to be doing that. And then in the end are left feeling really, really empty. And I think for me, that's like the greatest loss. That's what I don't want. And when you can, figure out who you are, who cares if Harvard rejects you? You know who you are. No one can reject your dreams. Like you are clear on you. Like, go ahead and reject me. That's fine. I'm going to find someone else and I will make my way.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love it. Yes. Have you ever had to like really coach any parents through that? So I hear you saying that you have to like, you really talk to students about that, but I'm curious about like parents viewing college rejections as like, my kid's not going to be successful now because Harvard didn't accept them,
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. I think one of the things, like when we're working with families and having conversations, we really talk about like, what is the aim for your kid here? Like, how do we kind of look at what is your goals for your child? And a lot of, again, comes back to is like, a lot of parents just want their kids to be happy, right? And then it kind of goes back to, it's like, how does kind of universities relate to, is it really a dream that you have for yourself, right? Because I think it's also very interesting that sometimes families, it's like, I can be a mom of 3, but hey, I still have my own dream. So then it kind of goes back to the conversation of how do we separate ourselves from the achievements of our kids, right? And it's so
Yeah.
hard, right? Because the ego is such a, even myself, like I will be the first one, it's so tempting to be like, anytime there is that outside validation, you're like, oh wow, yes,
Yeah.
I'm doing good, and then it can feel like that burn when it is, but it's such an opportunity, I think, for us to kind of, again, go inside and ask ourselves, it's like, what is the space that I want to create, in my home? What is the kind of the, and it's such an opportunity as well for really deep connection during this time, because the kids and the families are both feeling
Yeah.
vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to have that conversation rather than, again, push it away, say, oh, don't worry about it, it's okay, when you yourself you have feelings as a parent.
Yeah.
Your kid has feelings. So again, it's one of those spaces to say, sharing your rejection stories, like, normalizing it, being like, hey, let me tell you that time when, like, I got rejected from my early decision school and, like, sat with my sister and had a great Carvel ice cream cake. And, like, it may not have been the best coping mechanism, but it was like, a good moment here.
That's
So
right.
just, having those conversations.
It doesn't have to be perfect. So much of
Mm.
what we see online with Facebook and Snapchat and Instagram is everybody's perfect little moments.
Yeah.
Sharing an imperfect little story, like, that's okay. That's the way people are. It's not perfect. That's a great thing to model or to share with kids.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's also like an opportunity for us to ask ourselves, like, if we are having strong feelings that, man, I wish my kid would be at a certain school. I wish my kid would do this. Maybe it's like, it's kind of like, I was reading, it's like almost like jealousy, right? Or something like that.
Mm,
Again, instead of like shaming
Yeah.
it and pushing it down, maybe it's like a cue for yourself. Like, is there something that I'm
yeah.
seeking to do? Do I have an unfulfilled dream? Do I have a dream that's like calling inside of me? That's, forcing me to kind of project it on them. So I think that's, it
Yeah.
kind of is an opportunity to examine that as well.
I think it's definitely like there's a huge part of projection and living, if there was anything you didn't get to accomplish before your focus became your family and your kids, or anything that you've been putting on the back burner. And we all have stuff inside of us that we project onto other people, and it gets projected most strongly on those that are closest to us.
Close reality. Yeah.
Um, and there's also, I think, an element of fear and safety in that, of like, my kid needs to get into a good school because a good education means good job opportunities, means
Hmm.
security, and that they're gonna survive. Like, it's basically a survival instinct, right? Is that we want our kids to be successful because it means that they're going to be okay. And it means that they're going to be okay with or without us, with or without a partner, that they can stand on their own 2 feet, support themselves financially, and eat and survive this world. And so I think that the motivations can be varied and or cross over. It might be that you had a dream or didn't get to go to college or whatever, and you don't want your kid to feel that, so you want them to get in so that they don't feel the sting of rejection. It might also be that there's an unfulfilled need inside of yourself, and it might also be that you just want your child to be okay, and to sometimes a college education feels like a security blanket, even though there are hundreds of ways to be successful without one. And yeah, I think there's so much at play there, as far as like parenting through something like that.
Oh yeah. And it's so interesting because, like, one of like the most popular class at Yale is actually a class on happiness. And I think, there's some irony to this here that,
Yeah.
like, that is really like, and it goes to say, I think even as parents, we really have to, the mental health of teens is something that we really have to, it's such an important issue. Like, we are having, I forget the statistics, I think, when we were looking at, like, 60% of kids in their first year of college are, experiencing symptoms of depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
And again, I kind of look at it, but I look at, like, the system that we've created. Like, we've had these years because we have not focused on, like, who are you? Like, what do you love? What does that authentically look
Yes.
like for you? But we've, focused on getting in. What is
Yeah.
my friend like doing to how is my neighbor doing? Like, what is it? This, like, really frantic thing. And then we get there,
Performance, just constant
performance,
performance. Yeah.
Comparison to others.
Mm-hmm.
comparison. And then we get there and we still feel like that like we still feel lost, right? We still haven't,
Yeah.
it's like, it's kind of like the truth. It's like, we still haven't figured it out yet. Like it's still, you might have gotten it and had all the external. So I think it's like, and it can be something I think that feels really, it's also like, I always find service is it's so bonding for families, right? It's like the
Yes.
idea of like the expectations. I mean, that's a whole other thing is working with parents is like managing why do we have these expectations? Maybe we
Yeah.
even change maybe we should just kind of, readjust what expectations we should. Maybe it's, do I feel fulfilled? Do I feel excited?
Yeah.
I work with so many people like we are 17. We should not be feeling really exhausted. We should feel like really lit up about what we're doing. We should just be
Yeah.
like, and I don't care what you like. You could like, anime for all I care, but let's pursue that with like gusto and just go
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah. Yeah, there should be, and this is like our last 3 episodes on education have been about child-centered learning, child-centered education, updating the current public school system and even a lot of private school systems, which are mirrored off of public school systems, of like where we have a lot of kids in one classroom with one adult, maybe two, and then it's an assembly line of education instead of
Yeah.
personalized for
Yeah.
what each child's needs are and interests and strengths and natural gifts. We're just putting people through the exact same process and testing them and judging them all based on one set of standards that makes no sense for most people. And then we're wondering why when our kids turn 18 and head out into the world, whether it's college or trade school or a job or starting a business or a gap year, like whatever it might be, the kids leave the home and all of a sudden they've had all this structure and to-do lists of what to do for the first 18 years of their lives, and then they're off on their own and they figure out there's actually no rules.
Yep.
There's actually
That's
no
right.
rules other than like laws and police and some general
Change
like
the
don't
game.
murder people, right? Like you can literally go out into the world and do anything, and they're lost because they haven't spent any of their childhood learning their own strengths, their own skills, what they actually love versus what gets them a dopamine hit because an adult gives them approval for doing something, right? And so, and
Yeah.
we've looking at our neighbor or being compared to our neighbor or our sibling or whatever, and like being like, well, your brother gets straight A's, like why are you getting C's, And there's just childhood is so many people's childhoods are spent in performance and people pleasing mode instead of who am I and what do I want to do in this world.
Oh, absolutely. And like the grand irony is that like we have these education systems which, train people to all be the same, all be the same. And then we get to like the college application process. And like our question is like, what makes you unique? And now we have just stressed out total,
Right.
it like doesn't make much. I am trying to understand how this, it's just like that is mind blowing to me. And the interesting thing that I've always found is it normally is, and it's not all the time, everyone's different, of course, but like that thing about yourself that maybe again has caused you some shame, you feel insecure about, you're like, no, I'm not sure. Is this a quirk I want to show to the real world? That is generally your superpower. That is generally the thing that we want you to show.
Is it safe? Is it safe to do that? You got to feel safe to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great point. I love
Get
that
past
point.
the peer, right? Before you're being unique, being different in school can be horrendous.
Yeah.
Kids
Kids
make
are
fun of you and
mean.
the other kids. And you're not really prepared for it at that point. So that's a real conundrum of parenting is how do you're in the school system. Well, listening to you guys talk, we're in people pleasing mode. We're being prepared to be stamped out. I have to learn this year and then get on next year. And if I didn't learn that, well, now you're just getting the edges trimmed. It's like I imagine a big machine where you're stamping people out, and if you're not quite aligned, well, they're cutting little edges off of you. And some people go through on route on time. That's fine, but most people don't, or maybe nobody does by the end. How do you teach your kids when you're in a system like that, that's the system. How do you teach your kids to be self-motivated, to be internally motivated, and find your bliss, you know, in the midst of, yeah, but you probably a good idea to have a B average when you get out of high school if you want to go to Harvard.
Right.
There's
Yeah.
it's a complicated system. It's not a perfect world. How do we parent little people through that?
That is a great question. I mean, I think that is the question of our time. It's
Right.
I love it because I've often thought like it comes back to me. And I've had situations where, you're that mom or dad or whoever, and you get that call from the school. And it's so interesting. And it can be like, oh, is so and so, and your initial reaction is like, oh gosh, we haven't complied, we haven't done it. And it's so interesting. And
Yeah.
then I saw is like I bring that to my kids. And it happened one day. And I remember I was in such a mood and I was so like, and I could see I went to my one son and I was like being overly like, oh, are we doing this? Are we doing that? And then I had to like step back and ask myself, I'm like, do I want this trash?
That's
And I
right.
was like, my trash. Like, do I want this in my house? Like, this feels like
Yes.
Mind
something
trash.
I
I like
don't
that.
want.
Yeah.
So it's about kind of, I think it's so hard to control like what's out there in the system. But I think then it comes
Yeah.
back to us. How can we protect that space, that energy, those messages? And I have a lot of like, empathy for parents because it's like we are getting these messages that are like, it's like
Mhm.
ding, ding, ding. And like, is the kid okay? And that you feel afraid when you hear that. Like, that's worrisome. And then that is the energy we are indirectly bringing to our kids. So I think it's the question we have to kind of, it's going back and kind of redirecting. And, I always ask myself, like, what is that moment that I want with them? When I'm sitting with them, like, what do I want them to remember from me?
Exactly.
But it's
Exactly. That
hard. You
quality
feel it,
time moment. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah, it's
think there's
tough.
a way, even when you like, even if it like, especially like if you're a parent and you're listening to this right now and you've got young kids or grade school or middle school, high school kids in the public school system. And you're like, I always try to say at least once every episode, like, I don't ever want any parents sitting there being like, oh my God, I haven't done any of these things. And now I know that
Yeah.
I'm screwing up my kids. That's not the point of this podcast. Like, I want parents to hear these things. Like, now that we know better, we do better. I think that should just be the battle cry of this podcast at this point, because we say it
Oh,
every episode. And there is a way to live your truth and to sit with what you want, how you want to raise your children, and the reality of the fact that we are set up in a society the way that we are set up, short of going off the grid, buying your own land, putting in solar panels, growing your own garden, and becoming completely self-sufficient, which is difficult and rare. I know there are people who do it. I follow them on Instagram, which
Going
also
back to the
means they're not
1700s.
off the grid. They're on Instagram,
Get some whale oil and candles.
but like there are different, just like everything else in life, there is a spectrum. We are all on that spectrum, and we live in a society that is structured the way that it is for the times that we are in. And there's a way to live truthfully and honestly inside of your home, and to have those really deep conversations with your children about their experiences of the world and how to
Exactly.
navigate those with authenticity, and without trying to just play the game or people please or constantly perform and compare. Like, there are mindset and coping skills and ways to navigate and live in the world we live in,
yeah.
and live, it's almost like your home is like it's like a microorganism inside of the bigger
Hmm.
picture.
Mhm.
Hmm.
And so your kids are going to experience the world because there's no avoiding it. But there's a way to help them navigate the world that is true to your family's values.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's
And
so
yours.
true. I think say let's normalize like not doing it right all the time. Like I think that's so important. Like, you
Yeah.
know, I just want to like, remove the shame on that. Like, and I remember, I think it was like Brené Brown. I was reading that. It's like, shame thrives in silence. And I just remember one
Yes.
day, like I had a bad day with my kids, and I texted my sister. I was like, please tell me that like you lose your temper with like your kids too. And she was like, Lauren, like, hello, I just did it like 5 minutes ago. Please, like, and
Yeah.
it was like, oh, it was like a breath of fresh air. So I
Yeah.
think it's like being very honest that like no one gets it right all the time. And some grace to
Yeah.
ourselves that a lot of our responses are actually normal reactions to systems that are really making us feel a little stressed out and afraid.
A little
So
crazy. Yeah.
Yes.
Like you were
yeah,
describing being in Tanzania during COVID, where it's just different. It's there's no well defined path to follow. It's dynamic. Things are always coming at us as parents faster than you can really assimilate, and that's, creating a place, a home. It's like, okay, everybody come calm down, turn off Snapchat. Personally, I think things like Snapchat and Instagram, you mentioned filters before earlier, Lauren,
yeah,
that's just a horrible influence, but you try to turn it off, try to ban it. The trick is to be an island, get yourself to the place as a parent where you can help your kids process that stuff and come out on the other side seeing it for what it is, not taking it in as, oh well, this is the way everybody is, and thinking those things. It's not saying it's easy, but somehow I think we need to do that to have an effect on the way the world's going,
I
because
love that.
they like to stamp us in a little mold, and so they can sell us, so we can be a marketing category.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, yes, yes. Get yourself on an island and some good friends who are willing to, affirm you when
Yeah.
are human, right? Like when we just are human. And I think like that would be like the one message I would have for anyone is to, like if they're going through that, it's just like, hey, it's okay. Just be as kind to yourself as humanly possible. Like
Yeah,
most of us are doing the best we can.
yeah.
Yeah.
And on an island, get connected with other people,
Yeah,
get real, like your Brene Brown quote.
yeah.
It's call your sister. Don't try to white knuckle it and do it all on your own.
Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Totally
And
agree.
that can be hard. Like, I just want to speak to people
Yeah.
who may be listening and being like, I don't have anyone I feel safe enough to
Mm-hmm.
call.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely people who grow up in families and they are the first cycle breaker, right?
Mm,
They are the one who is done and is raising their kids, a complete 180 from the way they were raised or the
Got
way that
out somehow. Yeah.
they're
yeah.
getting out of something. And so they may be wildly alone right now.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, joining some kind of community center or just going to your public library and like taking your kid to like there's like baby reading groups and toddler reading groups and bigger kid reading groups, looking up the local free kid options and getting out
Yeah.
there and just being brave and meeting other parents until you find somebody you click with.
Yeah,
And
that's a great
then
idea. A list of
yeah.
resources would be good. Story time at the library or a religious organization, maybe. Not that all those are great, but
Yeah,
get out
you
with
find
people,
a
or you
church
can
that's
take
really
your kids,
supportive.
you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and then and then get up and have a cup of water or whatever they do to socialize, and get out there and bump into somebody. It doesn't even have to just mill in your community.
Yeah.
Yeah, now, boy, if you're out rural and stuff, then that can be limiting too. We'll have to think
Yeah.
of ideas to
It's a
give people, have a little
great
resource.
point. And that's I
Hmm.
think to me, that's always been the beauty of volunteering. I think like, a lot of like with my
Hmm.
volunteer
Hmm.
fellows that I work with, I always start
Exactly.
them off with that quote by Glennon Doyle. It's like, go to your heartbreak and you will find your people. Like run to your heartbreak and you will find
Yes.
your people. And
Huh.
Yes.
Huh.
I just
I like
that's where
that.
our people are. It's like if we find what drives us, what moves us, we run there. You know, Even in my moments when I felt most alone, if I do that, I will at least find, and that's to me the beauty of service is you're like, wow, I am there in community with others. Even if my individual life feels like it is crumbling and I am like messing up everything else, and I know I can be of service to someone else, you
Yeah.
I
know,
like
it would
that.
be better.
I like that. I get that. You told the story about your little one saying, "Are you still my mommy?" And
Yeah,
that
Ugh.
just that just cuts me, and
Yeah.
I'm sure
yeah,
a lot of other people too. And but then I look at at church today. I'm always fooling with the kids, and I love working with kids, and it's because of that. If you can it doesn't have to be perfect when you're parenting. If you can plant seeds, that will then grow and give them things to work on. They're going to spend more time as they get older. They're out in the world more, and you can't protect them. And you can't always just fix things, but you can give them tools in a relatively short period of time. That bubble we were talking about
yeah.
at home. Make your home a place where you can find out what's going on with them, and you can make suggestions and read a good book like Brene Brown or something, so you have ideas for different situations,
Mhm.
and talk to other people about, boy, my kid surprised me with this thing that happened at school. That's yeah, it takes a village in more ways than one these
Oh,
days.
it does. It does. And I mean, those
Wow.
that's how I survived Tanzania. It was 2 people who stepped up, Juma and Yusufu, who came in to me, I mean, helped me when I was just I will always they
Oh,
still work with me in my project now today. I mean, it's just they became the people, and it's just amazing. These people can come out of, nowhere, and I think I will always it's a certain level of connection that I will just, I stay in forever gratitude to them because I was like
sure.
in a time when I looked around and I was like, "Wow, this is not what I planned." Yeah, it's amazing who steps up. It's incredible.
That's where
Yeah.
real loyalty and connection comes from, is
Yeah,
shared trials and tribulations
yeah.
sometimes.
It is. There's actual scientific research behind that, and there's also the book Tribe, and I'm blanking
I've read that
on.
one.
I know Lewis
I've
gave it
read
to
that
you.
one.
So my husband is a retired Army veteran, and the book Tribe is by an author who, oh man, pretty sure he was also a veteran. That might be incorrect,
I need
but
to be
he
your
is
guy off screen with
describing.
Google.
Yeah, go ahead and Google it. But he wrote this book describing the the tribalism that is so bonding is through suffering. So that brotherhood, that I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think the book was too heavily about the military, but anyway, it's about the
It's more about the
concept
lessons learned.
of,
Yeah.
yeah, it's more about like the tribalism that occurs and where that comes from. And a lot, like, if we think back either to the Native Americans, or we take the army and combat as our examples, but it shows basically worldwide how societies actually became stronger and came out more intelligent and invented things, etc., together. Sebastian Younger,
Can I do
um,
that?
yeah,
You
is
can
the
edit that out.
author. No, that's good. We're referencing. We should know who the author is. Um,
Yeah, that's bad.
but basically, like, presenting the science of these studies that had been done in warring societies, and Native American tribes were always fighting each other, and then there were times of peace, etc. But societies that bonded and through suffering, because you had to rely on each other. And
Yeah,
so going through, like, my closest friends in the world are the ones that walked me through my 20s with anxiety, depression, panic attacks, etc. And they are my rocks. Like, I know that I can call them for anything for the rest of my life, and they will be there.
yeah,
And vice
lifelong,
versa.
lifelong.
So there's this, like 1000%, the people who lean on one another to make it through hard times is scientifically proven to bond you and make your relationships more fulfilling and deep. And
That's
that
what a
Yeah.
tribe is.
concept that concept can be translated to a parent-child relationship as well. Working through conflict and difficulty, whether it's directly between you and your child or your child having an issue with something else in their life, being the one that they can come to during hard times is the number one most bonding thing that will matter to them as they navigate the world.
Yeah.
Um,
How to
It
get
is so
connected,
true.
how to do that. I mean, that's like you were talking about, Lauren. Sorry, I'm doing too
Yeah.
much talking here, but
No, no.
getting out in a group of some kind, doing some kind of project and
Yeah.
working together on
mhm.
something, especially something you're
Yeah.
passionate about. Building houses for people or building services for people or that, that conflict. Anytime you're around people, right? You get three people in a room and there's going to be some kind of conflict eventually. That's where it comes from, is
Yeah.
working through it in the service of some bigger goal, some collective goal.
I love that. I think that's so true. And it's like all about like, how do I see my story, right? How do I see it? Do I see it as, is this my overcoming story? Is this my, I'm going to take it to a next level story? Is this my
Yeah,
next chapter? And I think it's either, and I think it's both about acknowledging what's honest and then also saying, well, what could this story be? How could I end this? Like, well, how could I
yeah.
write this?
How do
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
nudge this? How do I nudge this where think it needs to go?
How do I want to, yeah, where do I want to take this? And I think it's the freedom, finding your people and then having the freedom to write, and it's hard and it's slow. And that's another thing I want to normalize is that this is not, I think sometimes we think that this happens and like, no, like I am a
Yeah,
big believer in slow and small steps,
yeah.
baby crawling,
Mhm.
like
Baby steps. That's just what.
baby
Yeah.
steps, you
Yeah.
know?
You don't go out and save the world. You just do your
No,
part on making the
exactly.
world a better place, right?
Yeah.
It's not dramatic usually.
And that might mean like calling my friend on that day and saying, I feel alone. And that is my part in being a better
Yes.
human, saving or going to that library and figuring out, taking that brave step of saying, let me put myself out there. And that's hard. That's not an easy thing to do when someone's trying to do it differently. And I think that's what's really powerful about
Yeah,
this whole thing.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
I love
Boy, I think
it.
we hit on some important stuff today. That's cool.
This has been good.
Lauren, is there anything we're at an hour. Is there anything that we haven't I know I have to watch it.
See how fast it goes,
Um
Lauren?
Yeah, this was so much fun. I have had a good time.
is there anything that Lauren, that we haven't touched on that is crucial to your message, your work? Anything that we haven't gotten to that you want to share?
No, I think we've really shared a lot of like what I stand for and what I'm about. I think at different stories we've pretty encapsulated it all here. Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful.
I think we hit everything
Well,
on the notes too. So easy to hide in hard moments and some college admissions. There's probably people we could probably do another episode on
Oh,
college admission tricks,
oh,
I'll
that's its
bet.
own. Yeah, that's
You
its
know.
own thing. That's its own thing. But just I always say the question I guess that I've had on my mind. So it's just like, what is the cost of confusion? I think sometimes it's like we don't recognize
Hmm.
the impact that can have on our physical health, our mental health, our everything, not
Yeah.
knowing who I am and then signing up for a university for 4 years and then just trying to like,
mhm.
I mean, the power of getting clear and even sometimes embracing confusion as the part of getting clarity. For me,
Hmm.
it's like that is
Yeah.
the clarity of who my people are. Who do I even like to surround myself with? Who are these people who are equally as committed to
Yeah.
the change as me? And I think that to me is say if I'd encapsulate the message, it would be, and that's we have to, I guess, it's risking the vulnerability of allowing ourselves to be seen so we can find our people. If we hide,
Hmm.
it's hard to find our people. And I know because it's so easy to do. It's so easy to like go
Yeah.
behind the screen. I just want to normalize that because like it's hard to like again put yourself out there, be seen as a parent, as a student applying, and then
Mhm.
but the risk is that like we won't find those other ones who are also
Yeah.
vulnerably putting themselves out there as well and awkwardly and messing up and being like, whoops, so let me try again. I got rejected. Want to join me for ice cream? And those are hard moments.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Being willing to be seen, being brave enough to be
Yeah,
seen as an imperfect person. That can
absolutely.
actually attract, if other when you
Yeah.
evidence your vulnerability, I mean, other people will that lowers the threshold of resistance or fear for other people to say, hey, there's a vulnerable person. I'm a vulnerable person, even though I don't let anybody show it, or let
Yeah,
anybody
yeah,
know it.
absolutely.
That's all good communication. That's all really good stuff. And it's true in
Yeah,
business. Picking apart the confusion
yeah,
is very valuable in
yeah.
personal areas and in businesses. And I like that phrase. Getting rid of the confusion.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
so much.
being here.
Oh no, this was great. I have loved this conversation. I'm like totally invigorated, and now I'm like leaving to go. Oh, how do I want to make my island? That's my question. I'm
Right?
leaving with that question today.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Lauren. And we will see everybody next week. If someone came to mind while you were listening to this episode, or you are wishing you had a friend to digest it with, I would be so honored if you shared this link from this episode with them. I myself have always benefited from community and sharing, and I truly believe that it takes a village to raise a child. Our society has become so independent from one another, and parenting these days is often a lonely journey. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's why I'm here. If you have been seeking a more intentional approach to parenting, but you aren't sure where to start, I would love to hear from you. You can find me and all of my offerings at www.jennieb.co. And come follow me on all major social media platforms. It fills my heart to hear your stories, where you come from, and your big goals for raising the next generation. And don't forget, comment your parenting question on our YouTube channel, the Relational Parenting Podcast, to get it answered on one of our future episodes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please hit the subscribe button so you never miss out. I am so grateful that you are here. And always remember, you are never alone. I'll see you next week. This show is intended for education and entertainment purposes only. We will discuss things like mental health, abuse, PTSD, and other potentially triggering subjects. Please listen at your own discretion, and this podcast is not intended for anyone under the age of 18.